Okay, hello and welcome to my little Johann Sebastian Bach unit. Yeah, we're going to talk about his life and career and the pieces he wrote briefly. This is going to be a brief overview. So, Johann Sebastian Bach, a composer ahead of his time. I really think he was. If you listen to the stuff that he was writing at the same time as his contemporaries, it's just a little bit more involved. Bach lived from 1685 to 1750, so that puts him active in the late Baroque period. So let's put that in perspective. He lived to be 65 years old. Oh, and he lived in Germany his whole life. He moved around a lot, but never actually left Germany. So I'll show you the map in a bit. And here you go. During the late Baroque period, the other composers that were around were Vivaldi, Corelli, and Telemann, and Handel. And you probably have heard some stuff from them as well. So those were his contemporaries. And Bach had 20 children, two different wives. Only 10 of those children survived to adulthood, and 4 of those became successful composers in their own right. So, in his career, to make a living, Bach was almost always employed by a church, both to compose masses and perform them on Sundays. So he was working during the week, composing the next mass, and then he would actually be the one to perform that on organ at the mass itself. As a child in Eisenach, which is a city in northern Germany, a town, village, Bach's father, Johann Ambrosius, was the town musician and taught Johann to play the violin as well as the harpsichord. So he was getting trained musical education from a very young age, as you can imagine. So when he wasn't working for the church, Bach worked as the court musician to various dukes and princes. And basically, that's how you made money as a musician back then in the 16 and 1700s. The jobs that there were, the career paths to follow were you work for the church or you get rich nobility patrons who kind of commission you to write certain things and just have you under their employ. He also taught, but I imagine that he didn't have that much time to teach other students kind of like Beethoven did, because he was kind of also teaching his own kids and was busy working anyway. So here's a quote that I really like of his. "I was obliged to be industrious. Whoever is equally industrious will succeed equally well." So I feel like this is the equivalent to the modern day hustle that we're seeing with different certain musicians that really want to make a career of this. So here's the map. Here's what I want to show you. I'm just going to kind of do all this. Okay. He grew up in Eisenach, Germany, studying and composing music. So there's Eisenach for you. He also moved to Arnstadt, which I have been to. I've seen the grave. Mühlhausen, and these are all really close together. Weimar, which is a wonderful music city. Köthen, also. Köthen? I don't know. My husband is German, so he would know how to pronounce that. So then there's Leipzig, of course. And so these are all fairly close together, but when he was 20, Johann walked to Lübeck from Arnstadt to observe one of his contemporaries, who was the composer and performer Buxtehude. He really wanted to see this guy work, so that's Lübeck, all the way up there. So I'm going to take a bright blue marker thing, maybe, and draw you. Here's Arnstadt, and here's Lübeck, and this ended up being bright yellow and not blue, but I don't care. There's where he walked to. He moved all around these places, but walked to the furthest location that he ever went to. Just funny to me. So here we're going to talk about some of his works. He wrote famously these Bach inventions. So when we say inventions, we're not talking about like a mechanical invention, although I think he did invent some instruments in his lifetime, or at least build some. So these are musical inventions. So these are short two-hand exercises for keyboard students. Even piano students now use these inventions to build equal strength and technique in the right and left hands. Because as you can imagine, it can get a little off balance when you're playing just bass notes and chords in your left and melodies in your right. So this is to even that out. And speaking of teaching his own children, we think that some of these were used to educate Wilhelm Friedemann Bach, one of his sons. So here, I will play this and we will listen to the first invention a little bit, and you can read along on the right. Yeah, so there we go. There's some inventions. And that musician is playing a harpsichord, which is it's a keyboard instrument. Let me see if I can freeze on a frame of it. No? Here, sort of, I'll just let it play a minute. So this keyboard instrument is very special because it's called a harpsichord, and you can tell it sounds different than a piano, obviously. So in a piano, the strings are hit with hammers, and then when you lift your finger off the key, there's a damper that comes up and dampens the sound because the sustain of those piano strings is so long. With a harpsichord, that's not really the case. So what the mechanics inside a harpsichord are that they are still strings, but they're being plucked by bird feathers, like the end of the quill part. And I'm imagining that in a modern day piano, the construction is such that it can bear a lot of tension from those strings. And back in the 1600s, the innards of the piano were probably, or innards of the harpsichord and keyboard instruments were probably not engineered such to bear so much weight and tension from those strings. So when you have smaller strings and strings that are not as tight, you get less of a sustain from them. So that, and I just don't think that the bird feathers really create a lot of sustain. I think they create a lot of attack, and that's it. So that's why the attack is so sharp, and then the sound really just kind of disappears really quickly. And that's how the harpsichord is kind of getting its sound. So let's get to the next slide here. Come on. That's the way that, nope. There we go. Okay. So one of the other very famous pieces that he wrote is called the Brandenburg Concertos. There are 6 of them, and he wrote them between 1708 and 1721. He wrote them for Christian Ludwig, the Margrave of Brandenburg. Brandenburg is a place. And we think he wrote them and sent them to him in hopes of being hired to his court, but we don't know that Ludwig ever received them or looked at them or ever heard them performed. So, because Bach never got that job that he was hoping for, nonetheless, the Brandenburg Concertos are in the popular Italian concerto grosso style, and they each feature different sets of soloists. So, for instance, in Brandenburg 3, which is right here on the right, it's mostly string features, and they kind of go around the string ensemble, having little different section features. In Brandenburg 4, it's a little bit of a different ensemble, and the featured instrument is flute, and it's not the kind of flute that you think of in, school band today. It's more like it's a flute that kind of resembles a recorder, so a straight down flute, and it sounds a little bit different. It's probably made of wood instead of, brass or anything like that. And the Brandenburg Concerto No. 6 features violas. So that's a cool one to listen to. So here is Brandenburg Concerto No. 3. I'll show you the video, and you can read along with the violin part here on the right. Yeah, so there's a bit of that. There are wonderful, beautiful concertos. I love listening to all 6 of them anytime that I can. So, another composition you may be familiar with from Bach is the cello suites. There are also 6 of these, and they seem to have been written during the same time period that he was writing the Brandenburg Concertos. So that's between 1717 and 1723. There are 6 unaccompanied 6-movement suites for cello. Each suite begins with a prelude and then displays several dance movements like a bourrée, a minuet, sarabande, stuff like that, allemande, and most end with an English gigue, and each suite progresses in difficulty. For instance, you've heard suite number 1, the prelude, probably because it's really like the intro to Bach suites. Like the first, I won't say it's easy, but the first suite I think is a little bit more technically manageable. And as you go through, they just get a little bit harder. And the 5th suite, when you get up to the 5th suite, it requires the cellist to either tune their A string down to a G or just read it as, well, you have to tune it down. You have to tune it down. But they give you 2 options on how to read it, whether you want to read it as if your string is still tuned to A, which I think would drive me crazy, or reading the actual pitches that you're playing, which I think would help me, because I kind of have a relative pitch going on, and I think reading pitches that I'm not playing would probably drive me nuts. And in the 6th suite, that is designed to be played by a 5-string cello. It's a different instrument, so it's like, it wasn't called that back then, but it would roughly be the equivalent of what we know today as a 5-string cello. So I've always wanted to try that one on my 5-string electric. We'll see if that works out. So here is a video of Yo-Yo Ma playing all 6 suites. There's a long introduction to this, so do forgive me, and I will try to get this to the right spot.
And time for us to go live to the Royal Albert Hall for the second of this evening's proms. It's presented by Tom Service.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. We're live on BBC Radio 3. Welcome all of you to this sold-out audience here at the Royal Albert Hall.
So this is one of my absolute faves, and you can tell that he's doing a different bowing in there than what I have on this printout here. But that's the great thing about these, is they're kind of up to interpretation. So here is one of his most famous works for organ, the Toccata and Fugue in D minor. You've heard this before. It wasn't published until 1833, so like he died in 1750. It was, 70, 80 years later when Felix Mendelssohn prepared it and edited it for the public. And then Mendelssohn gave the Toccata and Fugue its first live performance in 1840. So here is the Toccata and Fugue. Lovely. Not scary at all. Not morbid at all. Just kidding. Um, so yeah, that is Bach for you, Johann Sebastian himself. You have a YouTube playlist. I hope that you can click on it from here, but if not, no worries. If you just go to YouTube and type in Bach playlist, and same thing for Spotify, they've got playlists on there, and you can listen to him all day long because he wrote so much music. So I hope that this has opened your world to Johann Sebastian Bach, and I really hope that you enjoy his music. Thank you. Till next time.